They say voices never die, only the hearts that once carried them do. But what if a single voice could awaken a legend long gone, stirring memories buried deep in time? What if a boy from the streets of Manila could make the world believe that Elvis Presley had been reborn? Under the glowing lights of the America's Got Talent stage, millions watched in silence as a young man named Rico Dela Cruz, just 23, stepped into the spotlight. He wasn't famous. He wasn't rich. But when he opened his mouth, time itself seemed to pause. Rico had grown up in the crowded alleys of Quezon City, raised by his widowed mother, Luz, a soft-spoken woman who sold food by the roadside. She had always believed her son carried something rare, something the world had yet to hear. To her, Rico wasn't just singing, he was channeling every unspoken pain, every lost dream. And in that audience, far from the glitz and noise, sat Simon Cowell, the man known for never being easily impressed. His stare was cold, unflinching, yet curious. He didn't know that what he was about to witness would shake even his guarded heart. The stage was silent. The microphone waited. And when Rico's voice echoed through the arena, deep, soulful, eerily familiar, everyone felt it. It wasn't just singing. It was reincarnation through music. The crowd gasped, the judges leaned forward, and somewhere in the air, a memory of Elvis Presley seemed to breathe again. But behind that moment of wonder was a lifetime of struggle, faith, and a dream that refused to die. How did a poor Filipino boy manage to bring back a legend? How did his voice find its way from the crowded streets to one of the world's biggest stages? This is not just a story about talent. It's a story about faith, sacrifice, and the unexplainable power of a mother's belief in her child, a belief so strong, it brought the king of rock and roll back to life. Rico Dela Cruz was born in a neighborhood where dreams were often silenced by the noise of tricycles, traffic, and survival. At 23, he had never known luxury, only the rhythm of struggle and the melody of hope. His mornings began before sunrise, carrying crates of bottled water for a local store, and his nights ended beneath a flickering bulb, humming softly to the ghosts of songs he could never quite forget. He wasn't the kind of boy who sought attention. Rico spoke less, listened more, and smiled only when music filled the silence around him. His voice was his secret world, a sacred space where the pain of poverty melted into something beautiful. But what made Rico different wasn't just his gift, it was the humility with which he carried it. He sang not to be seen, but to feel alive. His small room was decorated with torn posters of Elvis Presley, his idol since childhood. To Rico, Elvis wasn't just a singer, he was a symbol of power, confidence, and soul. Sometimes, Rico would stare at those posters for hours, whispering silent promises to himself, that someday, he too would sing on a real stage, not just on the streets where few cared to listen. Life, however, had other plans. His mother, Luz, grew weaker with each passing year, her body worn by decades of work and worry. Their tiny house leaked when it rained, and dinner was often just rice and soy sauce. Yet, she never stopped believing in him. Every night, she'd sit by the door, eyes soft with hope, listening to her son practice Elvis songs under the streetlight. Rico had one old pair of shoes, one microphone borrowed from a friend, and one dream too big for the life he lived. Still, when he sang, everything made sense. His voice carried warmth, grief, and something timeless, something that didn't belong to his world but somehow lived inside him. He didn't know if his songs would ever be heard beyond the alleyways of Manila. But deep down, he believed that voices born from pain have a way of finding their stage, no matter how far that stage might be. Rico's voice had always been his escape, but as the months passed, even music began to feel distant, like a friend slowly drifting away. His mother's health was worsening, and hospital bills piled up like unending echoes of fear. Luz's laughter, once bright and strong, had turned into quiet sighs. Yet she still urged him to sing, to chase the dream she could no longer afford to believe in. There were nights when Rico would sit by her bedside, holding her frail hand, whispering Elvis songs in a trembling voice. He sang to keep her alive, to remind himself that not everything was slipping away. But when her breathing grew weaker, so did his courage. Each note he sang felt like a plea to heaven, a desperate call for one more day with her. Then came the night that changed everything. The street outside was quiet, the city asleep, and Rico had just finished his shift. He entered their small house to find the radio still playing softly, "Can't Help Falling in Love," his mother's favorite song. Luz lay still on the bed, her face calm, her hands resting over her chest. She was gone. The silence that followed was unbearable. The walls seemed to collapse inwards, and the world turned colorless. Rico didn't cry at first, he just stared at her, numb, broken, and utterly alone. For days, he couldn't sing. The very thing that once gave him life now felt like a curse. In the weeks that followed, Rico sold what little they had to pay for her burial. The microphone, the posters, even his old guitar, all gone. But grief has a strange way of finding purpose through pain. One night, standing by the sea, he sang again, not for applause, not for a dream, but for her. His voice carried into the wind, trembling, raw, and real. That moment became the spark. Somewhere inside, he felt her presence, a whisper telling him not to stop. His mother's faith had built his wings. Now, he had to learn to fly without her. Months drifted by, and Rico's life became a blur of routine and silence. He worked longer hours, spoke less, and carried an invisible weight that only music could lift, but he no longer sang. The world had moved on, yet a part of him was trapped in that night when his mother's song had ended. One humid afternoon, while stacking bottles outside the store, Rico heard a sound that froze him, a familiar tune echoing from a nearby radio. It was, "Can't Help Falling in Love." The same song that had played the night his mother passed away. For the first time in months, he didn't turn away. He closed his eyes, and her voice filled his memory, soft, proud, and unbroken. Something inside him cracked open. He realized his mother never wanted him to stop singing, she wanted him to live through it. That night, he took a long walk to the park where he used to practice. The air was warm, the streetlights dim, and the city around him buzzed faintly like a half-forgotten dream. He stood there, under a flickering lamp, and began to sing. The first few notes trembled, hesitant. But as his voice grew stronger, strangers began to gather. Some filmed him, others simply listened, their faces softening as that deep, soulful tone filled the air. Rico wasn't imitating Elvis this time, he was feeling him. It was as if every sorrow, every memory, every ounce of love he had left had found its voice again. Among the small crowd was a woman named Clara, a local music teacher visiting Manila for a talent outreach program. She stood silently, eyes glistening, as Rico's song reached its final note. Moved beyond words, she approached him afterward, not with praise, but with an invitation, to audition for America's Got Talent Philippines. It was surreal. Rico didn't believe it at first, but Clara saw something in him, something raw, divine, and timeless. That night, Rico walked home barefoot, heart pounding. For the first time in years, he looked up at the sky and whispered, "We're not done yet, Mama." The next morning, he packed his mother's old rosary, borrowed a clean shirt, and boarded a bus toward the city of dreams, carrying her spirit and his destiny within his voice. The journey to the big stage was not lined with lights, it was lined with fear, doubt, and exhaustion. Rico had never left the Philippines before. The flight to Los Angeles was his first time seeing clouds from above, and every second felt unreal. He clutched his mother's rosary the whole way, whispering silent prayers between tears he tried to hide. When he arrived, the reality hit him hard. The city was vast, cold, and indifferent. He was just one of thousands chasing dreams, and his accent, his clothes, even his silence made him feel invisible. There were moments when he almost turned back, when the thought of standing before cameras and judges felt too heavy for a heart still grieving. He practiced in cheap motel rooms, singing softly so as not to disturb the guests next door. The mirror became his only audience. Each night, he watched himself, his tired eyes, his trembling hands, and asked if his mother would still be proud. But with every song he rehearsed, something inside him began to rebuild. His pain became his teacher, his loss became his strength. He learned to breathe through the fear, to let his emotions guide his voice instead of hiding them. Every lyric carried a piece of Luz, her faith, her warmth, her unspoken encouragement. He wasn't just singing anymore, he was healing, slowly, painfully, beautifully. And yet, the struggle didn't stop. There were moments when the producers questioned if he had the TV spark, when others told him his style was too old-fashioned, that Elvis was gone, and he should be someone modern. But Rico stayed true. He knew his gift wasn't imitation, it was resurrection. He didn't want to become Elvis, he wanted to keep the spirit of sincerity alive through his own pain. By the time audition day arrived, he wasn't the same boy from the Manila alleys. He was still humble, still scared, but now his voice carried something immortal. Every setback, every heartbreak, had shaped him into an artist with soul deep enough to make even silence weep. He wasn't just chasing a dream anymore. He was becoming one. The lights dimmed. A hush swept across the America's Got Talent stage. Rico stood at the center, hands trembling slightly around the microphone. The judges sat before him, Simon Cowell, Sofia Vergara, Howie Mandel, Heidi Klum, each waiting, curious, unaware of the storm that was about to rise from this quiet young man from Manila. When the first note left his lips, the world seemed to pause. It was, "Can't Help Falling in Love," the same song that had carried his mother's last breath. But this time, it wasn't sorrow that filled his voice, it was love, gratitude, and rebirth. His tone was deep, hauntingly pure, carrying the ache of every lonely night, every dream denied, every prayer whispered into darkness. The crowd leaned forward. Some clasped their hands, others simply closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. It wasn't just a performance, it was communion. Rico's voice didn't imitate Elvis, it channeled him. The same spirit, the same warmth, but reborn in a heart that had known hunger, loss, and faith. Simon Cowell, the man known for his unshakable composure, froze. His face softened, eyes glistening with disbelief. He leaned back slowly, lips parting as if words couldn't form. It wasn't the perfection of the voice that stunned him, it was the truth in it. As Rico sang the final line, "Take my hand, take my whole life too," his voice cracked slightly, not from weakness, but from memory. In that instant, the massive theater fell utterly silent. Then came the eruption, a thunder of applause, tears, and standing ovations. Simon stood, shaking his head, smiling through the shock. He pressed the golden buzzer. The confetti rained down like pieces of heaven, golden lights reflecting in Rico's tear-streaked face. He looked upward, whispering a thank you to someone no one else could see. He didn't win the season that night, but he had already won something far greater. He had fulfilled a promise to his mother. He had brought a legend back to life, not through imitation, but through love. In that moment, Rico wasn't just a singer. He was living proof that even grief can create miracles when the heart refuses to stop singing. When the lights faded and the applause became a distant hum, Rico stood backstage, clutching his mother's rosary. He wasn't thinking about fame, or money, or even the golden buzzer glittering above him. He was thinking about how far love had carried him, from a cracked pavement in Quezon City to a world stage watched by millions. His journey had never been about chasing Elvis. It had always been about keeping a promise, to sing, to feel, to never let his mother's faith die inside him. Through every hardship, he had learned that pain can either break you or build you, and that true art is born not from perfection, but from honesty. In the months that followed, Rico's performance became one of the most replayed moments in AGT history. People from across the world shared his story, the boy who brought Elvis back, the son who sang for his mother. His voice became a bridge between generations, a reminder that some songs never fade, they only find new hearts to live in. But behind every success story lies a quiet truth: greatness often begins in the smallest places, in a mother's whisper, in a dream too fragile to be spoken aloud. Rico understood now that his gift was never his alone. It belonged to every struggling soul who had ever been told their voice didn't matter. Sometimes, the world measures success in trophies and titles. But the truest victories are invisible, the kind that happen inside a heart learning to heal. Rico's voice had once been born of grief, but now it carried light. His story became proof that love never really leaves, it simply changes form and keeps singing through us. And so, when he walked off the stage that night, he wasn't walking away from his past, he was walking with it. Every note he would ever sing from that day forward carried one message for the world. That even when the music stops, the echoes of love, a mother's love, a dreamer's hope, will always find a way to be heard again.